Fundraising mindset in nonprofits, nonprofit donor trends to look out for. So, if you've been trying to raise money for your nonprofit the past years, you've probably noticed that sometimes there are topics that are hot or trendy, and sometimes the same topics are no longer much in demand. And donors aren't really interested in supporting work on those topics anymore. And that can be really frustrating, of course, when your topic, the thing that you work on, suddenly turns out not to be trendy at the time. And then you might wonder, how can I find ways to get money that I need to do my important work, right? And so there are a lot of trends, not only when it comes to topics, but also regarding the way of working that donors prefer at a certain moment in time. And so it is something that you unfortunately need to keep an eye out on as well. And in this video, I'm going to help you find areas that might be of interest for you to follow and to look out for in your potential or current donors when it comes to trends. And it is super important, first of all, to say that when I say donors, of course, I'm aware, you're aware that there are many different kinds of donors, right? So there are governmental agencies or institutions or ministries that are grant giving, that have grant programs. There are private individuals who are donating from their own pocket, so to say. There are private foundations. There are foundations that have been set up by companies. So the word donor makes it seem like there is one type of donor and one size fits all, but that's of course not the case, right? So as we will see when we look at types of trends to look out for, we'll see that some donors are paying more attention to certain trends than others, and that has to do, of course, with the type of donor that they are. So please keep that in mind, and of course also keep in mind that even within a certain type of donor, just like you and I are different, every private individual donor is different, every company foundation is different, and so on and so forth, right? So I just want to give you some pointers, and then I hope that will be helpful for you in navigating trends in donor giving and granting. So there are four types of trends that I would like to highlight to you. And the first I already mentioned, and that's the theme, the topic, right? So there are sometimes periods in time when some topics are really hot and become the priority for example, government donors. But also when it comes to private individuals, that's also, there are of course trends happening when a big group of individuals tends to see a certain topic as super important, and then the next year that could be different, right? So for example, now with several wars going on, that is on one hand something that people find worthwhile to donate to, but you also see that within giving for the war, for example, in Ukraine, but also a couple of years ago in Sudan, there were specialized organizations that were, for example, taking care of the zoo animals or the pets. And then a lot of private individuals like to donate to animals, and then when they can donate money for other organizations to take care of animals that are affected by the war, that speaks to them, right? And so the same goes also for government grant schemes, of course, government granting programs. That's also closely related to, of course, the priorities of the government at that time, which depend on a mix of the build-up of the government, the political background of the government, but also the situation in the world at the time and what are priorities there, or what are perceived as priorities there. Yeah, so you will see that probably now, at the time that I'm saying this, 2023, 2024, you've seen that topics like migration, human trafficking, security, but also climate change, and also in connection to migration, are important topics for many government donors, right? So when you are a small nonprofit, it might not be easy for you to know, of course, like what is a priority of a government in another country, or how do individuals look at donating and what are important topics for them. It is something that you can get a better idea of and a feeling for if you practice a PESTEL analysis. So PESTEL analysis is something that you usually would do in the frame of creating your multi-annual strategic plan. And when you're in the research phase of creating your multi-annual strategic plan, then you're looking at political, economical, social, technological, legal, and environmental aspects, not only in the here and now, but also how you expect trends to be in those topics. And in that stage of your process, you'll start talking to people who have knowledge in certain fields that might not be the usual people that you work with, but just to learn more about developments in your context, in your society, and within your donor base. So that might be a good starting point to start looking out for trends in topics and priorities in topics now and in the coming 2 or 3 years for your government donors, but also looking at your private individual donors. I'm Susanne Wakker. I'm a nonprofit operations strategist, and I love talking about and thinking about all of these things that are basically at the back end of your nonprofit, like finance, admin, HR, management, fundraising, project design, all of these things. If you're interested in that, feel free to subscribe to my channel so that you get a notification whenever a new video drops. Or if you prefer reading, then please use the link in the text below and subscribe to my weekly newsletters on Mondays, Thursdays, where I share stories around nonprofit operations topics like the one that we're talking about today. And so we are looking at nonprofit donor trends to look out for, and we identified that different donors respond differently to trends and also are sensitive to different kinds of trends. And we spoke about the trend regarding topics and what you can do to sort of stay in the game for that. And now I want to highlight a few other trends that are more to do with the way of working of your donor or the way of collaboration between you and the donor. So when it comes to, for example, approach in the work, a big trend that has been ongoing for a while and still is going strong is that donors prefer supporting local organizations and smaller organizations rather than bigger international organizations whenever possible. And for a private individual donor, this is usually quite possible because they can donate to small organizations or even create their own small organization or support a local organization that they have met, for example, during a visit to a certain location, right? So that is what local private individual donors do in the Netherlands, for example, and in other Western countries. They tend to prefer giving to smaller organizations rather than to bigger organizations at the moment. And that's a lot to do with the idea that if you give to a small organization, especially if it's a local organization, then your money will be used more effectively, more efficiently, and it will be used more for the cause or the community that is to be served, and less for the organization itself, so that less will be spent on overheads. And that's what private individual donors find super important. They don't want to fund high salaried nonprofit CEOs, but they want to send their money, for instance, like I mentioned, to those zoo animals or pets in a war zone to be treated, to be supported, to be maybe evacuated, and so on and so forth. So they're not interested in the director who's making all of that possible, but they're interested in maybe the vet who's taking care of the pet, maybe the driver who's driving the pet out of the country, etc., etc. The same is also true for many Western government organizations, but there's a challenge there because, of course, if a ministry is having a grant making program. And if they say we want to give to small organizations and local organizations, then of course it probably will mean that they will need to give a lot of small grants. And for them, of course, considering the paperwork, the bureaucracy, it is easier to give maybe one big grant and then ask the grantee to take care of the sub granting to local and small organizations. So that's where you see that even though they prefer local organizations to be supported directly and to be empowered by the support directly, they are not always able or interested in taking care of that themselves. So if there is a consortium with a local organization as the main applicant, that might be a plus. But if there is an international consortium that doesn't have a local main beneficiary, then they could still see it as a way to get money to local organizations if the plan of the consortium includes re-granting to local organizations, and that could be and very often is one of the requirements of such type of granting. Yeah, so you see that government organizations want to do the same as private individuals, but they go about it in a different way. They can't be as direct for practical reasons. But also one of the reasons is to do with accountability. So accountability is also something that's super important for some donors, and for some it's more important than for others. And it's impacting more and more how they behave because of the time that we live in and the online communication that is so easy and is creating like little hypes here and there, making it easy to share information about certain wrongdoings or scandals, and that reaches then the supporting group or the organization that, for example, the governmental donor needs to account to, like, for example, the parliament. Yeah, so if a ministry gives out a grant, it is part of the ministry program. The parliament is controlling that or is monitoring that and could ask for reports and then could ask questions based on the reports, but could also ask questions based on certain publications in the media. And since the media now includes also Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and other media that are easy to use for anybody like me, like you, to spread information, that also could mean that if locally something goes wrong, which of course it can always do, then it gets more easily into the attention of media abroad, who then ask members of the parliament, who then start asking questions to the ministries, right? So this means that for the ministry, it can be risky, and we spoke about that in a previous video, to donate to an organization or to give a grant to an organization that might not have a good track record or that might not have good systems, so that accidents with corruption and fraud can happen, right? Maybe not out of bad will, but simply out of incompetence or not having the systems in place to prevent things from happening. Yeah, so that's a big risk, because if that happens, if it gets to the media, to the parliament, then they're in trouble in the parliament, and nobody wants to be in trouble, and ministries especially don't want to be in trouble with the parliament. So what those organizations then, what those donors then start doing is looking for guarantees, which of course there aren't, but anyway, looking for as strong as possible guarantees that everything will be fine with the grant that they're going to give. So they're going to be asking about strategic plans, about policies around finance management, contracting, procurement, anti-corruption, anti-fraud, HR, security, safeguarding, child protection, and things like that. And then they try to sort of create certainty that there won't be any problems with accountability. And of course, this is something that's also important for example, private foundations, whether they are created by individuals or companies, but especially companies, of course, also don't want to have their reputation damaged by a grantee who's making a mistake, and then the company being attacked for supporting that organization who's making the mistake, right? So that's an important trend also for donors, that they are more and more sensitive because it's easier for certain things to come out because of the social media, and also because the public opinion is following social media very easily, and then could start, it could backfire on the organization that has given the grant or the sponsorship or the donation. So that's the other side of another trend that I want to highlight, and that is the trend of visibility. So while accountability is sort of making organizations scared, visibility is the big opportunity, of course, for example, foundations that are connected to a company. Yeah, it could be very worthwhile for that foundation, for the company especially, if it could be connected to nice successes that a nonprofit that they're supporting is making, because that could actually, instead of damaging their reputation because of a mistake or a fraud case, it could actually enhance their reputation if they are seen to be supporting good things happening in the community where the company is operating, or for the topic that the company is working on. Yeah, so you can see that sometimes companies are trying to uplift their credibility and their reputation a little bit by supporting nonprofits that are working a little bit in the same field as them, even if it might be a little bit contested somehow that the company is having the same vision and mission as the nonprofit, right? So visibility is getting more and more important, especially also because, as I said, we have social media nowadays, and so companies are also looking to um, find ways to reach private individuals, consumers like me, like you, via social media, right? And so they're looking for catchy things that they can post there and share there, pictures, videos, short texts, and links, of course, to good things that are happening that they're supporting. Yeah, so it means that as a trend, you can see that more and more donors, and especially when it private foundations that are connected to companies, are asking for very specific activities to be done by the grantee when it comes to visibility. And those activities include very often sending like summaries or draft texts for Facebook posts, for example, video clips to the donor so that the donor can spread those things by themselves and not just share the things that the nonprofit is already sharing on its own platforms. And I have seen that in some cases the requirements for those kind of communication visibility activities are so strict and elaborate that it almost becomes a project within the project to comply. And so when we look at those trends, we see that when we understand the trends when it comes to topics and themes, it can help us find ways to be successful in fundraising, even if our topic might not be trendy at the time. But when we look at the ways of working, we can also see that understanding the trends and understanding where the donors that we want to approach are when it comes to those trends, it can also help us see which donors aren't maybe right for us, which donors might have requirements that we cannot comply with, or that we don't want to comply with, or that we know that, yeah, it's just too much work if you look at the return on the investment for that communication work, for example, that might not always pay off for the nonprofit, because all of that communication will be done by the company, by the foundation, and it won't necessarily bring more attention to the nonprofit or bring maybe private individual donors to your organization. So there might be moments when understanding how your donor is responding to certain trends and what it means for how they would like to work with you and what their conditions and requirements are, it might mean that you will say like, I'm sorry, but we're not going after that grant after all. Or when you see the grant agreement, you might say, sorry, but we can't manage all of that, right? As I said, I've seen sometimes where I thought like, if the nonprofit is going to do all those communication activities, it is really taking away a lot of time from the project implementation, for which there already isn't really any coverage of salary costs, right? So you're working for free, which is, I think, not what we want and nor what we should want. And then you're also doing extra work for free to improve the reputation of your donor. So in that case, I advise that nonprofit organization to not accept that grant, because it would simply be impossible for them to comply, because it would take away people's time from doing important fundraising work for themselves, but also important project implementation work for their community and cause. Yes, so it's possible that on the basis of your analysis of the trends and how you see that your donors are responding, you will reject a donor, either by not approaching them or by not accepting the proposed grant agreement. There is, of course, also another side to rejection, and that's the one that we always find very hard to deal with. And that is when the donor rejects us, when they reject our proposal, and when it feels like they're rejecting us as an organization, maybe as a person, or in our community, especially in our cause, which is our passion. So in the next video, I would like to talk to you more about that, and to share with you how I have handled such kind of rejections in my nonprofit career. I hope to see you then. Bye.